This then, my friends, is part 80 as we continue our study of chapter 20 of Revelation. And before I actually move on to the chapter, I want to pay tribute to this little booklet. I've often quoted from it in various videos. It's a booklet which gives the views of various Christian writers, and many of them going back centuries and centuries, but many of them predicted events which were still future, some of them hundreds of years ahead of their day, but they accurately predicted them, and I've already quoted many of them. It's a more sure word of prophecy, a reference document which substantiates the historicist understanding of prophecy. Historicist means to do with history, continuous historic, written by Jonathan Burke, and it was published in 2004 by the Christadelphian Study Service in Hawthorne Dean, South Australia. So it's a wonderful little booklet, small, but it contains quite a lot.
Thank you, Neil.
So Jesus' kingdom will be in this world, but not of it. It will be as different from all previous kingdoms as truth is from falsity. Christ's kingdom will be totally in this world then. Now, the rebellion at the end of the 1,000 years. This is, you might say, something almost unbelievable, to think that there's going to be a major rebellion at the very end of the 1,000 years against the authority of Christ and his government. But we can take it as certain that it's going to happen. And it shows that to some extent human nature will still be human nature, admittedly under strict control, but at the end the control is going to be withdrawn, and we'll see what will happen. When the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be loosed from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations which are at the four corners of the earth, that is Gog and Magog, to gather them for the battle. Their number is like the sand of the sea. They marched up over the broad earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. Fire came down from heaven and consumed them. The devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet were. They were tormented day and night forever and ever. In the Catholic RSV Bible points it out, Satan will be loosed from his prison when the 1,000 years are ended. Human nature will be set free from the rule of the saints, who will be called back to Jerusalem by their king. He will call back all his saints from all over the world, and this will leave the people of the world without governors. The saints will be called away so as to put humanity to its final test. It will be coming up to the final judgment, when Jesus will judge the living and the dead for the second and last time. The prize will be eternal life. Who among the living will be worthy of that prize? To put them to the test, Jesus will give them full freedom to see how they will use it. Satan will come out to deceive the nations. Human nature will have a field day. Leaders will spring up everywhere.
Really? After that 1,000 years? Gosh.
Yes, it's unbelievable.
Incredible.
It's almost unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
But the thing is, who could make it up?
No, none of us could.
It's only divine knowledge.
No, I believe it.
Because it goes right against all sense of logic and reasoning.
But it is so fascinating.
It's just fascinating.
Yeah.
And the details we're given about that final rebellion,
yeah,
it leaves us in no doubt it's going to be a really major rebellion against the king and his government.
Wow.
So human nature will feel the leaders will spring up everywhere. A new political class will appear. They will use lies and false promises, just like politicians have so often done. They will manage to deceive a big number of the earth's inhabitants. These leaders will try to make a name for themselves. just like the rebel leaders at the Tower of Babel.
Wow.
Because there's something in human nature that always wants to make a name for themselves.
Yes.
Never mind the how much deception and lies they use to do it. Satan will come out to deceive the nations which are at the four corners of the earth, that is Gog and Magog. The new leaders who will arise will succeed in deceiving people all over the world. The nations in the four corners of the earth are Gog and Magog. Gog is Russia now. The prophet Ezekiel in chapter 38 describes the Russian attack on Jerusalem around the time of the second coming. Ezekiel mentions Magog with Gog. Dr. John Thomas was a great writer on the Bible. He wrote a book with the title Elpis Israel, which means the hope of Israel. Elpis meaning hope in Greek. It was published in 1849. Dr. John says on page 463, Magog is geographically associated with France and Germany. Gog and Magog will lead the attack against Jerusalem at the start of the 1,000 years. Another Gog and Magog will lead an attack against Jerusalem at the end of the 1,000 years. There will be two completely different groups. The Gog and Magog at the end will come from the four corners of the earth, from north, south, east and west. Gog and Magog at the start will come from only one part of the world, that is the north. What they both have in common is an attack on Jerusalem. So that is why they are both called Gog and Magog. To gather them for battle, they will be fully intent in having a real fight with their enemies, whom they will regard as Jesus and the saints. Their number is like the sand of the sea. Huge numbers from all over the world will join the rebellion. They marched up over the broad earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. This will be, of course, Jerusalem. The rebellion will be an attempt to overthrow the government in Jerusalem. It will be an attempt to bring down the king and the saints. The rebels will probably have posters with the words, "Down with the king and his cronies." You can well imagine it. Posters like that in different languages.
Unbelievable.
We don't want this clique in Jerusalem. Possibly even more rude than that.
Yeah, very rude, I would say.
Victory to the working class and so on. Down with the king and his cronies. Down with this unelected government in Jerusalem. Down with the king and his his clique, let's say. We want freedom. They'll use the sacred cause of freedom then, as if that right was all on their side. The rebels will shout, they will question, what do we want? Answer, an election. Question, when do we want it? Answer, now. So I'm just imitating some of the slogans now that are...
May I ask some questions?
Yes.
So, not interrupting, but they used freedom for the vaccination. Was that real? I mean, did that give them freedom? I mean, I'm comparing it to this.
Oh, well, that's something that the vaccination is something that I think I don't wish to comment on at this point. It's something separate. But the thing is that
It's a good question, but not for this point. Yeah.
not at this particular point. But the thing is that the slogan of freedom can easily be used, and of course can easily be misused as well. So
I mean, in a way, Patrick is right. When the mob starts, we want freedom. It is that kind of freedom. It's not the true freedom from the truth.
It's not.
It's a perceived freedom.
That's right, because
And Patrick's right, actually.
because
so it's okay.
that
Yes.
freedom, yes, that freedom that the crowd shout for is a freedom that they cannot deliver.
No, it's an illusion.
It's an illusion
Because there's true freedom,
the
which is the
only
truth.
comes from Jesus.
Yes, exactly.
Freedom from human nature.
Yeah.
It would be an attempt to replace divine rule with human rule.
But before you carry on, actually, it's a really good point that Patrick just made, because it's the difference between how people perceive freedom.
Yes.
I mean, people perceive that their freedom is to choose to be homosexual or a feminist or an ideologue, but actually there is, as you said, only one freedom.
And of course, all freedoms carry responsibilities as well.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a limitless freedom.
No.
For instance, none of us are free to cross the road where we like and when we like, because we get knocked down by a bus or a car.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, none of us is free to go out to shop and steal.
No.
There's all sorts of limitations.
Yeah.
And this, of course, the very idea of freedom, you see that when we realise that the real barrier is human nature itself.
Yes.
That needs to be freed, and we need to be freed from.
That kind of rebellion. It's a rebellious freedom.
It's a rebellious freedom, yes, which cannot possibly deliver what it claims to want. It would be an attempt to replace divine rule with human rule. It would be like the rebellion of Korah, Dathan and Abiram against Moses and Aaron. Now, there was a great rebellion in the past against the true servants of God, Moses and his brother Aaron. Moses was the leader of Israel, but he was not self-appointed. He was, in fact, he was very reluctant to become the leader of Israel, to lead them out of Egypt. And his brother Aaron was the high priest, and there was a fairly big rebellion to attempt to overthrow them. We can take it that the future rebellion will be much the same, but on a much bigger scale.
Yeah.
So we read, now Korah, Dathan and Abiram took men and they rose up before Moshe. This is the Hebrew Bible I'm quoting. Moshe is his Hebrew name, but certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, regularly summoned to the congregation men of renown. They gathered them, in other words, highly respected figures. They gathered themselves together against Moshe and against Aaron and said to them, you take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why do you raise yourselves up above the congregation of the Lord? This is from the Jewish Koran version. Here is what the Jewish Tanakh version says. Now Korah, Dathan and Abiram betook themselves to rise up against Moses together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community, chosen in the assembly, men of repute. They combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, you have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them, and the Lord is in their midst. Why do you raise yourselves above the Lord's congregation? So, how will Jesus and his saints react to the siege of Jerusalem? Fire came down from heaven and consumed them. This fire will come from Jesus and his saints. This is what happened to Korah, Dathan and Abiram as well. Their 250 followers. In other words, it happened to, these were the leaders, and it happened to them and their followers. The earth split apart under them, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the men with Korah, with all their goods. They and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. Fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. A combination of fire and the earth opening wide. It opened wide and they all sunk into it. All who will lay siege to Jerusalem at the end of the 1,000 years will also be wiped out. The devil will be thrown into the lake of fire. The devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet were. And points it out. The devil was thrown into the lake of fire. This will be the total destruction of human nature. It will be wiped out as completely as if it were burned by fire. That will happen soon after the siege of Jerusalem. The last judgment will take place. The living and the dead will be judged. It will be the second and final judgment. The good people from among the living and from among the dead will be given everlasting life by Jesus. When that time comes, everyone on earth will be immortal beings. They will all be equal to the angels. All will have part of the divine nature. Human nature will have vanished like the snows of yesteryear.
Thank you.